You know, some people just can't seem to mind their own business. We all have that one neighbor, the one who complains about the color of your fence, the placement of your trash cans, or even the way your grass grows. But let me tell you, my neighbor Linda Harrison took things to an entirely new level. She wasn't just a meddler, she was on a personal mission against my mailbox. At first, I thought it was an accident. Maybe she was clumsy, maybe she wasn't paying attention, or maybe it was just bad luck. But over time, I realized that this wasn't random at all. This was a calculated obsession. Week after week, she found a way to accidentally bump into, knock over, or otherwise damage my mailbox. And it wasn't just a light tap. No, she hit it with enough force that I had to repair or replace it multiple times. Now, I'm a patient man, but even patience has its limits. If Linda wanted a war, she was going to get one. The next mailbox she tried to destroy would be indestructible. And let me tell you, her reaction when she saw my new creation? Absolutely priceless. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be locked in a full-scale battle over a mailbox, I would have laughed in their face. But here I am recounting the ridiculous saga of how a woman turned a simple piece of property into a war zone. And if you think I'm exaggerating, it's only because you haven't met the type of person who loses sleep over a mailbox that isn't even theirs. It all started with little things. My mailbox was positioned right on the edge of my property, just like every other mailbox in Willow Creek community. Nothing fancy, just a regular, functional mailbox that did what mailboxes are supposed to do. But for reasons that only Sean and Linda's inflated sense of control could explain, she decided that my mailbox was an eyesore, a personal offense against the so-called aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. At first, the damage was subtle. One day I walked outside to grab my mail and noticed my mailbox was slightly crooked. No big deal, right? Maybe it was the wind, a stray chihuahua, or a kid playing too rough, but then it happened again and again. Each time, my mailbox was a little more damaged than before. At first, I chalked it up to bad luck, but soon the frequency of these incidents became too suspicious to ignore. Every single week, something happened to that mailbox. Just when I started to feel paranoid, wondering if I was overthinking things, the truth literally fell into my lap. One day, I decided to install a security camera in front of my house. Now, I didn't do this because of the mailbox itself. Our neighborhood had been experiencing a few break-ins, and I figured it was a good investment. But what I caught on camera that night, I never could have expected it. On the very first night of recording, I checked the footage, and there she was, Linda Harrison, middle-aged, dressed in a ridiculous flowery robe, flashlight in hand, kicking my mailbox with all her might. Yes, kicking it. Not an accidental bump, not a slight push, full-on attacking my mailbox like it had personally insulted her. At first, I just stared at the footage in disbelief. Then I burst out laughing because it was so unbelievably ridiculous. I mean, what kind of person does this? Most normal people, when faced with a situation like this, would call the police or confront the culprit. But me? No, I was too intrigued. I wanted to see how far she would go. So instead of confronting Linda, I quietly reinstalled my mailbox the next morning without saying a word. And then I waited, because I knew she'd be back. For a brief moment, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was Linda Harrison, a grown woman, standing under the dim glow of her flashlight, wearing that ridiculous flowery robe, kicking my mailbox like she was leading a revolution. If I didn't have it all recorded, I would have thought I was losing my mind. At first, I was in shock. Then I laughed. A deep, uncontrollable laugh. The kind of laugh you get when you witness something so absurd that your brain refuses to process it properly. This couldn't be real. Now, any sane person would have marched straight to her house, confronted her, or even called the police. But me? No, I had something else in mind. I wanted to see how far this madness would go. So I did what any rational man in my situation would do. I reinstalled my mailbox the very next morning, acting as if nothing had ever happened. I didn't knock on her door. I didn't bring it up to any of the neighbors. I simply set it back up like it was indestructible. And then I waited. That night, right on schedule, Linda returned. This time she didn't kick it. She pushed it with her hands as if testing its strength. When it didn't immediately fall over, she simply shrugged and walked away. It was a game to her now, a twisted obsession where my mailbox was her personal punching bag. She wasn't going to stop. At that moment, I made a decision. This had to end. If Linda wanted to go to war with my mailbox, then she was going to find out what real resistance looked like. And I wasn't just going to win, I was going to win in style. I spent the next few days researching the ultimate solution. First, I thought about concrete, a nice thick foundation that would make my mailbox practically immovable. But no, I needed something stronger. Then I considered reinforced steel, the kind they use in bank vaults. Tempting, but it still wasn't enough. For a brief moment, I even entertained the idea of an electric shock system. But then I remembered that I liked my freedom and didn't want to end up in court. And that's when I found the perfect answer. Titanium. Yes, it might sound like overkill, but trust me, I was beyond caring at this point. I made a few calls and found a locksmith who specialized in custom installations. When I told him what I needed, he paused for a long moment before saying, "You want a titanium mailbox? Man, who did you piss off?" I just laughed. "Oh, you have no idea." 2 days later, my masterpiece arrived, a pure titanium post reinforced with concrete and topped with a mailbox resistant to impact, corrosion, and, most importantly, crazy neighbors. If Linda wanted to kick something, well, let her kick that. The next morning, as the locksmith and his team installed the structure, Linda drove past my house. She slowed down. Then she stopped right in the middle of the road. For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression a perfect mix of shock and pure indignation. I could almost hear the voice in her head screaming, "What's that idiot up to now?" I pretended not to notice her and kept supervising the installation like a man overseeing a military-grade defense system. The locksmith worked meticulously, setting the structure deep into the ground, ensuring that not even an earthquake could take this mailbox down. Finally, when everything was done, I stood back and admired my creation. It was beautiful, brilliant, indestructible. But the best part? Now it was her turn to act, and I was ready. That evening, I settled into my favorite chair with a hot cup of coffee and pulled up the security camera app. I already knew what was going to happen. And sure enough, at exactly 2:13 a.m., Linda Harrison returned, flashlight in hand, wrapped in that same flowery robe, looking like she was about to commit a felony. She approached the mailbox slowly, eyeing it as if it had personally offended her entire existence. Then she did something that made me grin. She looked around, checking to see if anyone was watching. She had no idea she was starring in her own security camera special. And then, the moment I had been waiting for, she reared back her foot and swung with everything she had. And my friend, what happened next was pure poetry. The impact was so strong that she was practically thrown backward. Linda lost her balance, stumbled, and fell hard right onto the sidewalk. For a moment, she just sat there holding her foot, writhing in pain while her flashlight rolled away into the street. From my living room, I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled. I had just witnessed the best episode of my own personal reality show. And the best part? This war was far from over. The morning after I finalized my masterpiece, I stood outside, supervising the final touches. The titanium mailbox, reinforced with concrete deep into the ground, was finally complete. This thing wasn't just built to last, it was built to win. And that's when Linda Harrison appeared. She was driving past my house, as she did every morning, but the moment she saw what was happening, she slammed on her brakes. Right there in the middle of the street, she sat motionless, staring at me as if I had just built a missile launch pad instead of a mailbox. Her face was a mix of shock and sheer indignation. I could practically hear her thoughts. What is that idiot up to now? I didn't even look at her directly. Instead, I continued my work, inspecting every bolt and securing every inch of the mailbox, making sure it was indestructible. The locksmith gave me a nod of approval as he finished. "I've never installed anything like this before," he admitted. "This thing could probably survive an earthquake." That was the idea. When everything was set, I took a step back and admired my creation. It was a thing of beauty, strong, unwavering, and completely impervious to lunatics. But the best part? Now it was her turn to act, and I was ready. That evening, I prepared for the show. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, settled into my favorite chair, and opened my security camera app. I already knew what was going to happen. And sure enough, at exactly 2:07 a.m., Linda Harrison appeared on the screen. Wrapped in that same ridiculous, flowery robe, flashlight in hand, she crept toward my mailbox like a burglar about to pull off the heist of the century. She looked around cautiously, making sure no one was watching. Of course, she had no idea that she was the star of my own personal late-night reality show. Then came the moment of truth. She approached the titanium beast with hesitation, as if sensing that something was different. But her stubbornness wouldn't let her walk away. She squared her shoulders, reared back her foot, and swung with every ounce of strength she had. And my friend, what happened next was pure poetry. The moment her foot connected with the titanium post, I could almost feel the shockwave through the screen. She was practically launched backward. Linda let out a sharp yelp, completely losing her balance. Her flashlight tumbled onto the pavement, rolling away like it had abandoned her in her moment of need. She landed hard, right in the middle of the sidewalk, clutching her foot with both hands. For a moment, she just lay there, writhing in pain, muttering a string of curse words so colorful that even a sailor would have blushed. And me? I leaned back, took a slow sip of my coffee, and grinned. It was the single most satisfying thing I had ever watched. After what felt like an eternity of groaning and cursing, Linda finally sat up. She reached for her flashlight and pointed it at the mailbox, as if expecting to see it dented or broken. But there it was, immaculate, immovable, indestructible. For the first time, I saw something that I had never seen before in her face. Defeat. Linda had lost, and she knew it. But if I thought this was the end, I was very, very wrong. Because if there's one thing I've learned about people like Linda Harrison, it's that they never know when to quit. And what she did next? Well, that's where things got really interesting. Linda Harrison had lost. She had kicked my titanium-reinforced mailbox with everything she had, and instead of taking it down, she ended up taking herself down. By all logic, that should have been the end of it. A normal person would have accepted defeat, licked their wounds, and moved on with life. But Linda? Oh, she was built differently. The next morning, as I stepped outside to grab the newspaper, I was greeted with what was, without a doubt, the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. There she was, Linda Harrison, sitting on her porch, a giant bag of ice pressed against her swollen foot. She wasn't just hurt, she was humiliated. I could see it in the way she refused to look in my direction, in the way her jaw was clenched so tightly, I thought she might snap her own teeth. She wanted to pretend I wasn't there, but we both knew the truth. The entire neighborhood knew the truth. She had attacked my mailbox, and the mailbox won. Now, I'm not saying word spread quickly, but let's just say that by noon, even the old couple at the end of the block, who barely left their house, knew something had gone down. Neighbors walked by her house with suspicious smirks. Outright laughed. The best part? Nobody even had to ask what happened, because deep down, everyone already knew. Linda Harrison had finally been put in her place. Or so I thought. Later that afternoon, while I was washing my truck, I saw a sleek black sedan roll up in front of Linda's house. I recognized the license plate immediately. Lawyers. I chuckled to myself as I watched a stiff-looking man in a suit worth more than my truck step out of the car, briefcase in hand. Linda, still limping, rushed out to meet him, her face twisted in exaggerated agony. She was dramatic before, but now she was putting on a full Broadway performance. I leaned against my truck and watched the scene unfold, already knowing where this was going. The next day, it happened. I walked out to check my mailbox, the very one she had tried to destroy, and found an official envelope waiting for me. Linda was suing me. Yes, you read that right. Linda Harrison, the same woman who had spent months vandalizing my property, was now accusing me of intentionally installing a dangerous structure with the intent to cause harm to third parties. I nearly fell over from laughter. The woman who had kicked a titanium pole of her own free will multiple times was now claiming that I had somehow set a trap for her. I sat down on my porch, tears in my eyes from laughing too hard. This was it, her last desperate move, and I couldn't wait to see how it played out. The day had arrived. I had been waiting for this moment ever since I received that ridiculous lawsuit. Linda Harrison had filed an official complaint accusing me of intentionally installing a dangerous structure designed to harm innocent people, as if my mailbox was some kind of medieval torture device. And now we were both standing inside the Ridgewood County Courthouse, ready to settle this nonsense once and for all. Linda arrived limping dramatically, her foot wrapped in bandages, as if she had just survived a near-fatal accident. And of course, she wasn't alone. By her side was a pompous-looking lawyer, the type who talks like he's auditioning for a legal drama, probably charging her an absurd hourly rate to embarrass himself in public. Me, I showed up alone, because honestly, I didn't need a lawyer to beat this clown show. The session began, and the judge, a middle-aged man who looked like he had seen enough stupidity in his career to last a lifetime, sighed and nodded toward Linda's lawyer. "Present your case." Her lawyer cleared his throat and launched into what I can only describe as an Oscar-worthy performance. "Your Honor, my client has suffered severe injuries due to the malicious actions of the defendant. He installed a highly resistant structure, fully aware that it could pose a significant risk to unsuspecting pedestrians. There were no warnings, no safety measures in place. This was a clear act of negligence and recklessness." Oh, right. Now I was apparently some evil genius, masterminding a plot to harm innocent people with a mailbox. The judge turned to me, looking more bored than concerned. "Sir, how do you respond to these charges?" I crossed my arms and smiled. "Your Honor, my neighbor destroyed 3 of my mailboxes before I installed this one. I simply wanted to make sure this one wouldn't get knocked over too." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof of that?" Oh, I had more than proof. With a grin, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a USB stick. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." The officer took the USB, plugged it into the courtroom system, and played the footage on the screen. And just like that, the entire room watched as Linda, in her ridiculous flowery robe, marched up to my mailbox in the middle of the night and kicked it with all her strength. Then came the best part, the exact moment of impact. The video froze on the frame where Linda's leg bent backward, her face twisted in agony, as she realized just how big of a mistake she had made. Silence. The entire courtroom was dead quiet. Linda's lawyer fumbled for words, his once confident posture shrinking by the second. Even the judge rubbed his temples, looking like he was about to start reconsidering his life choices. Then he turned to Linda. "Madam, did you kick the structure of your own free will?" Linda opened her mouth, desperate to salvage the situation. I didn't know it was so hard," she stammered. The judge exhaled deeply, rubbing his face with both hands like a man who had officially run out of patience. He motioned toward the bailiff. "Next case?" And just like that, case dismissed. Linda had lost again. But if you think that was the end of it, oh, my friend, you don't know Linda Harrison. If Linda Harrison had even the smallest shred of dignity, she would have accepted her defeat, moved on with her life, and let the mailbox work come to an end. But as I had already learned, Linda didn't know how to lose. She stormed out of the courtroom, furious, limping, and muttering words that could make a sailor blush. Her foot was still bandaged, but let's be honest, it was her ego that was really hurting. And if I thought she was going to finally let this go, I was dead wrong. Because Linda wasn't finished with me yet. No, she wasn't going to rest until she had one last attempt at taking me down. The problem? This time she really screwed herself over. A few days after the trial, I started hearing rumors from my neighbors. Apparently, Linda had a new plan. Since she couldn't beat me legally, she was going to try turning the entire neighborhood against me. Her new brilliant strategy? A petition to have my mailbox removed. Yes, after losing in court, she was now claiming that my mailbox posed an imminent risk to public safety. Her argument? Think of the children. Now here's where it got even funnier. There were no children in our neighborhood. The Willow Creek community was mostly made up of retired seniors and middle-aged couples without kids. The closest thing we had to a child was Buddy, a 14-year-old Labrador who spent most of his days snoring on a porch somewhere. In other words, her excuse made 0 sense. But that didn't stop her. She went door to door, trying to get people to sign her petition, using fear tactics and dramatic speeches about how my mailbox was an instrument of destruction. But here's the thing. Linda had spent years making everyone's lives miserable. This was a woman who had issued bogus complaints about people's lawn decorations, trash bins, and even the color of their window shutters. She had fined neighbors for having their Christmas lights up too long, complained about BBQ smoke, and once even called the HOA on someone for excessive bird feeding. So when she started pushing her ridiculous petition, people had enough. Her first victim? Mrs. Thompson, an 80-year-old retired nurse. Linda knocked on her door, flashed her fake neighborly smile, and launched into her monologue of concern. Mrs. Thompson stared at her, listened for about 5 seconds, and then, slam! Door shut, no signature. Linda moved on to Mr. Harris, who burst out laughing before she could even finish her sentence. Then came the best part. Someone, I don't know who, but I owe them a beer, decided to flip Linda's petition against her. Instead of a petition to remove my mailbox, they started circulating a petition to remove Linda from the neighborhood. And this petition spread like wildfire. Within 3 days, it had more than enough signatures. And suddenly, the real conversation wasn't about my mailbox anymore. It was about getting rid of Linda Harrison once and for all. Linda had finally picked a fight she couldn't win. And it was beautiful. Linda Harrison thought she could manipulate the neighborhood in deciding with her. But she had underestimated just how much everyone despised her. As she went door to door rambling about the so-called dangers of my mailbox, one neighbor, fed up with her nonsense, finally snapped, "Linda, for God's sake, shut up." And that was just the beginning. Someone with a sense of poetic justice flipped the script. Instead of collecting signatures to remove my mailbox, they turned the petition against her. It became an official document requesting her removal from the neighborhood. And within just 3 days, it had more than enough signatures. The real battle had begun. The Willow Creek community had rules, clear, strict rules. If a resident became a persistent problem, the HOA had the power to vote them out. And after years of terrorizing her neighbors, Linda was finally on trial. At the end of the week, I received an email from the community council. An emergency meeting had been scheduled. The topic? Linda Harrison. The night of the meeting, the community hall was packed. People who usually kept to themselves showed up just to watch her downfall. Linda walked in trying to look composed, but anyone paying attention could see the fear in her eyes. She knew she had lost. The leader of the HOA stood up, cleared his throat, and made the announcement. "We have received multiple formal complaints regarding Linda Harrison's conduct. In light of this, we are putting her removal from the neighborhood to a vote." Linda's face went pale. She tried to argue. She tried to blame me. She even tried to say this was all some conspiracy against her. But no one cared. The vote was cast, unanimous. Linda Harrison was officially expelled from the neighborhood. The moment the decision was announced, something incredible happened. The entire room erupted in applause. People who had been silent for years finally had their justice. Linda had 30 days to sell her house and leave. And let me tell you, that was the best month of my life. The neighborhood transformed overnight. People who barely spoke to each other started bonding, celebrating the fall of the Queen of Tyranny. And me? Oh, I enjoyed every single second. I made it a daily routine to stop in front of her house, give her a big, cheerful smile, and continue on with my day. Little by little, the for sale sign appeared. And then, one fine morning, she was gone. Forever. The neighborhood was finally free. And my mailbox, untouched. At first glance, this story might seem like nothing more than a ridiculous feud between neighbors. But beneath the humor and absurdity lies a deeper lesson about resilience, community, and the consequences of one's actions. The first and most obvious lesson is that persistence pays off. Instead of retaliating in anger or engaging in a never-ending conflict, I chose to stand my ground strategically. By reinforcing my mailbox instead of engaging in petty disputes, I turned an act of destruction into a personal victory. This teaches us that the best way to deal with unreasonable people isn't always to fight them directly, but to outsmart them. Another key takeaway is that justice often prevails when people stand together. Linda had spent years making life difficult for others, thinking she could push people around without consequences. But when the community had enough, they took action. This story highlights how a neighborhood or any group of people can unite against toxicity. It's a reminder that bullies, no matter how persistent, will eventually face the consequences of their behavior. Finally, the story teaches us that sometimes the best revenge is patience. Had I acted impulsively, I might have escalated the situation unnecessarily. Instead, by letting Linda expose her own ridiculousness, I allowed her to destroy herself. In life, we don't always need to seek revenge or force a resolution. Sometimes people's own actions will bring about their downfall. In the end, the mailbox war wasn't just about a mailbox. It was about standing firm, letting karma do its work, and proving that no matter how stubborn some people are, they can't win against a community that refuses to back down. If you enjoyed this story and had a good laugh, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment below, and tell me, have you ever dealt with a neighbor like Linda? I'd love to hear your experiences. And if you want more crazy, entertaining, and satisfying stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Your support helps the channel grow, and trust me, there are plenty more wild stories to come. So hit that like button, drop a comment, and share this video with your friends. Let's keep the laughs going.